Today I'm going to show you how to replace the sand in your pool filter so that you don't have to pay somebody a couple $100 or more to do it for you, or buy a whole new sand filter. To do this project, here are the tools that you're going to need. To figure out how much sand you're going to need, ideally your pool filter is going to have that on there. Mine's a Hayward, so it's got it down here. You can see under the media type, it requires 300 pounds or 136 kilograms of sand. If you don't have all the tools needed to tackle this project, it should still cost you less money to buy the tools needed to do it yourself than it would cost you to pay somebody to do it for you. So if you're up for tackling that, then you can get it done yourself and end up with some tools for future projects. Before we get started, here is a pretty cool internal view of what your filter might look like. Basically all that voided space outside of the piece in the middle and the piece at the bottom is where your sand sits. We're going to be sucking that sand out of there and pouring new sand in. So I'm going to go ahead and start from the beginning and take you step by step through the process of sucking out and replacing the sand in your pool filter. Whenever you're working on your pool filter, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure it's turned to off. You can go the extra step and make sure this breaker is turned off here as well. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your water supply is turned off. We have a shallow end skimmer, a deep end skimmer, and a deep end drain. Our deep end drain is already turned off here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our skimmers. You can tell the water's cut off when this piece here is perpendicular to the pipe. Next, you're going to want to loosen this piece so that your filter can drain. Next thing we're going to want to do is saw off our pipes. Some of you might already have a union set up here. Essentially what it lets you do is unscrew the pipes so that if you ever have to do maintenance to your filter, you don't have to saw them off every time and re-glue and repair. Today I'm going to go ahead and install one just because I think it'd be pretty handy to have one. I'm going to use a hacksaw here. You do not want to push hard down into the pipe when you're sawing, because if you push down too hard, you're going to cause the blade to bend and not get a smooth cut on your pipes.
Try to make your cuts so the pieces closest to the filter head are straight and don't have any bends in them like this one here, because they may end up pointing in a different direction than what you need them to when you're tightening everything back up. If that happens, you'll just have to end up rebuilding that little section of your pipe.
Next, you're going to want to loosen this collar here. There should be a nut and a bolt on either side. You're going to want to save those. Might be able to just twist it and get it off there like I did. Now we're going to use our pipe wrench to loosen our pipes connecting to the filter head. I already went ahead and did these two. I'm just not sure if the camera caught those. Excuse me, spider. Got a little friend. Should be good to go ahead and take the head off now. Pro tip if you aren't super strong, try to use the ledge under here to lift. I would avoid using the pressure gauge or the eyeglass as points for gripping, just to avoid breaking them. So I'm kind of grabbing and wiggling it and lifting. Also twisting and lifting seems to be helping. And that's the inside. We got sand, water, a little bit of gunk. Pretty cool. And we're gonna go ahead and vacuum all that out. Got my shop vac. And it's got a wet filter in it. You're going to want to use a wet filter since that sand might be wet. So there are some filters that do both, but for my shop vac, which is a rigid shop vac, I need a wet filter specifically for this task. So we've got a lot of the sand out of here, enough to where I can get this pipe out and the laterals down at the bottom. This unit right here is all one piece, and you can actually fold the laterals in down there so that this piece can come out of the top of the filter pretty easily. Just pull that out And that's kind of what that looks like. To save myself some time, I'm going to go ahead and try to dump it over. If you have too tight of a space or you don't think you can get it to tip over on your own, just use your shop vac over and over until the inside looks pretty clean. Before you start moving your filter to dump it out, I would recommend putting markers down so that you know where to put it back, so that when you go to put everything back together, your plumbing is not going to be misaligned. This is the inside now. I'm just gonna give it a quick rinse, get it nice and cleaned.
I'm checking to make sure that the laterals don't have any cracks in them and that they bend back up properly, or else it may need to be repaired. And for the filter head, you want to clean out your eyeglass if it's got anything like algae in it or debris, and then you want to make sure that the O-ring looks intact and doesn't have any damage, or else it may need to be replaced.
For this next part, you're going to want to make sure that the grooves here on the bottom line up. Put this piece back in, you're just going to drop it down in and then open up all the laterals. Once you've got this in the center, you're going to want to cap it off or put tape on it so that when we're loading sand in here, nothing's going to get in there.
You'll most likely need a 1.5 inch or a 2 inch cap.
Put your drainage cap back on. And the last thing you want to do before you start putting sand in is fill it about halfway with water. That's going to help take some of the pressure off the laterals when you're dumping sand in so that they don't get damaged. And you might notice that the piece here in the middle, the laterals might start floating a little bit. Just hold them down while you're filling it. They'll stop moving around. All right, it's looking good. If you got someone to help you, it's handy because then they can hold that pipe down in there. But if you're just doing it by yourself, just go slow and keep checking on it, making sure it's staying in the center. I'd say after about 2 bags of sand, that pipe's going to be staying in there pretty snug, so you should be good to dump in a little bit faster. Go ahead and take this cap off. Gonna line this up and drop it on. You want to make sure it's lined up here with how it used to be with your pipes. So kind of use those for reference when you're putting this back on. Now we're going to secure the collar. It's going to close around these 2 pieces here and pinch that together nice and snug. You put the cap on there on both sides. So now it's time to put our pipes back on. You're going to want to use Rain or Shine medium blue PVC cement
To glue your pipes together.
and then this right here is called Purple Primer.
Using this before Rain or Shine will strengthen the bond.
I know that I mentioned putting a union piece on here so that we could easily do repairs in the future. I do want to show you though real quick. In order to just repair these without adding on a union, you're going to need a 1.5
to 2 inch pressure PVC coupling. Real quick lesson on how to identify pressure versus drain waste vent PVC. Pressure PVC has thicker walls as well as is usually longer where the pipes are going to insert into the fitting in order to accommodate high pressure situations. If you're shopping online, you can see somewhere in the details that it is pressure rated. Here you can see it in the drain waste vent row. You can actually see whoever owned our pool before us and did some plumbing work on it. There are pressure fittings here, and then there are drain waste vent fittings here. To figure out what size of PVC fittings you're going to need, there are a few different ways you can tell. You can look for labels on the PVC fittings you already have as well as the pipes. Sometimes you're going to see it etched in and other times you might see it written on it or printed on it.
And if you're not seeing any of that, since you've got your pipes cut open, you can go ahead and just stick a measuring tape along the diameter of the inside of the pipe. And that will tell you the size of your PVC pipe. If you look, there's a ridge inside. One pipe is gonna go in up into that ridge, and the other pipe is gonna do the same thing on that side. So I'll show you here on one what it would look like. Before you put your pipe pieces back in, you're gonna want to wrap some Teflon tape around the threads here, like so, nice and tight.
You're going to want to make sure that you're wrapping the Teflon tape clockwise so that when you're spinning the pipe into place, the tape is not going to crinkle.
Put your pieces back on. You're going to want to make sure you start with any funky shaped pieces so that you don't bump into anything once it's nice and firm in there. And then work your way towards those straight ones because they're easier to twist and finagle. The main difference between installing a union and a repair piece is how big of a gap you're going to need to cut on your pipe. So if you're going to do a union, you're going to need to cut a bigger piece off here. If you're going to do the repair piece, you can just cut off a little bit, and you may not even need to cut off any depending on your pipes and how much wiggle room you have and how much tension you're noting by squeezing that repair piece on when you're doing your dry fit. That's going to tell you how well everything's going to fit together, but you'll just see in there that ridge is a lot bigger inside the union than inside of the repair piece. So that's the biggest difference there. Everything else is going to be the same. And now I'm going to saw off enough to make space for my union.
And this first step is technically called the dry fit. It's where you're putting all of your PVC fittings and pipes together, getting everything cut and aligned properly before you put any glue on and make things permanent.
This piece over here has enough wiggle room to actually not to saw anything, so kind of a nice example for you there what that's going to look like. One last step before you get to gluing is making sure your pipes are cleaned and your edges are nice and smooth. You can use a deburrer to make sure these edges are smooth and get that ready.
Once you're satisfied with the alignment of your pipes and how you got everything cut, you can go ahead and get ready to glue. For the purple primer, you're going to do one light coat on each of your pipes and then 2 liberal coats inside of the fittings on each side. Basically where the pipes and the fittings are going to touch each other, that's where you're going to want the primer as well as the cement. You want to shake up the Rain or Shine before you use it. You're going to do 1 light coat inside of the fitting and 2 liberal coats on the PVC pipes. Really important to make sure it doesn't pool or puddle when you're putting it on. Do that as best you can, or else it can cause clumps inside of the pipe once you've got everything glued together. It was incredibly hot when I was installing these, so I actually ended up having to make some adjustments after my first attempt of gluing everything together. It was just drying way too fast for me. So if this happens to you, you're going to want to use acetone to remove any of the cement that you've already put on there. I didn't have any handy, so we did the best that we could by just adding a second layer, and that kind of wet everything again so that we could make a second attempt. That's not the best method, but that's what we had to work with. But some quick tips for installing things really quickly so you can prevent the issue of having anything dry too fast is just starting on one side, 1 pipe, 1 PVC fitting at a time, and also having a buddy there to help you, someone who can just throw everything on and push it together immediately after you've put the glue on. Just because when you've got all that stuff in your hand, it can get kind of messy and you may just not move as quickly as you think you might be able to. And then for us, we actually ended up just skipping the primer altogether. It's not recommended to skip primer for high pressure situations because it's good to have that extra strong bond that the primer provides. But we were just really struggling to get things on fast enough. So we just said screw it and we did what we did. Do as I say, not as I do. Once you've got all of the cement on, you're going to want to push your fitting onto the pipe and then give it a quarter turn clockwise. And then once you've got the fittings put on, I would go ahead and twist them together just to make sure that you've got a good flat seal between both sides of the union. If your union isn't installed properly to where the pieces sit flat together and can twist together really tightly, you're prone to getting some leaks in there. So just make sure that everything's fitting together nice and smooth, nice and tight, and you aren't seeing any gaps. And then you can go ahead and sit back and let everything cure. It has been several hours now and I am back and ready to just clean up the insides. I'm just going to pick off any chunks or pieces of extra
cement that I put on earlier. I'm gonna seal the unions by twisting them shut, and we're gonna run this baby on backwash for about 3 minutes, and then we're gonna set it to filter and see how she does. When you go to turn your pool pump on, you may hear a sound like this, and that means that you have lost prime, which essentially means air has gotten into your filtration system. So we've got to add water back in to the point that it's just only flowing with water. There's no air in there. So you're going to want to open this up. Gonna run that hose back into the pipe there. Okay, so after you've had it running for a minute, you're gonna want to fill it up in here. Close the lid real fast. Tighten these. Get a pressure seal. And try running it. You're gonna want to wait a sec. See if you've got your prime back. And I don't know if you can see it here, but there's water coming out of this hose, which means you're in a good spot. If you're not seeing water come out of that hose, then you probably need to add more water to the system. And then when you can't see water running in there anymore, that means it's full of water and you're good to go. Once it's run on backwash for 3 minutes, run it on rinse for 1 minute, and then you're good to set it to filter. And those are the steps you need to replace the sand in your sand filter. The sand in your filter may need to be replaced if you're noticing that your pool is cloudy and not filtering properly. The pressure gauge on your filter is acting a little wonky. Ours was sitting at 0 and sometimes fluctuating up to 5 psi. Or you may notice that there is sand appearing in the bottom of your pool. If you just vacuumed the bottom of your pool and there was no sand down there, and the next day you're noticing some, then that is definitely a sign that the sand in your filter needs to be replaced. A few things that might seem really obvious to some people, but I just want to mention it because it wasn't obvious to us when we first owned a pool. Make sure that you have your skimmer baskets and pool pump baskets in place when you're running your filter. You want to have a basket in every single skimmer that you have, and you want to have a basket in your pool pump. Editing me here with a few other tips. Make sure that you're actually emptying out those baskets that you have in your pump and skimmers. You can actually also get a filter sock that you can put inside the skimmer baskets, and that'll just help filter out even more small particles and keep those from getting into your filter. If you are ever using a manual vacuum in your pool that connects into one of your skimmer baskets and then goes into your filter, make sure you have your filter turned on waste, or else all of the particles and the gunk that you're sucking up will go directly into the sand in your filter, and that can really clog and gunk things up in there. Waste, however, is just going to push it straight out the backwash hose so that nothing is going into the sand in your filter. You should run your filter on backwash if your PSI is running about 8 to 10 above what it should be running on your filter, so make sure you're checking that gauge. And those are some of the bigger things that I wish we had known when we first got our pool. It probably would have saved us a lot of headache. So I hope that that helps you. I hope that you found today's video helpful. Please let me know if you have any more questions. If you like being handy, artsy, hanging out with animals, trying to be more eco-friendly, or anything like that, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I hope you have a fabulous day or night. Bye. Well, I highly recommend just vacuuming it out and not trying to dump it. If you have any doubts whatsoever that you're able to roll it over and dump it.